Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a new edition of Seasonal. My name is Anthony. You can call me Mr. Nitro if you so choose, and we're going to be talking about the format of this edition. Now, we have 24 teams joining us, and you've just seen the seeding for the tournament. We have two groups of teams, the first one being our top 8 teams, and the second one being the remaining 16 contenders, as we call them. Now, these teams will be fighting for 10 weeks for the title this time around, and the tournament's going to be broken up into 3 stages. First off, we're going to have the play-in stage, where the top 8 teams will be fighting for seeding into the next stage, while the remaining 16 contenders are fighting for survival. But we'll get into that in just a moment. The second stage of the tournament is the group stage, where the groups will be mixed together based on the seeding from the play-in stage. Now, all teams are facing elimination at this point, and this will be 4 weeks of games. At the end of those 4 weeks, the remaining 8 teams will be moving on to the playoffs, where it will be single elimination for 3 weeks to fight for the title. So let's talk about this first stage, the play-ins. What we're going to be doing is spinning the wheel to determine the week 1 matchups for this stage. For both the top 8 group and the contenders group, one team from Group A will be matched up with a random team from Group B. And yes, we will be using the wheel to determine these matchups. Now, we've created an example bracket here using a random wheel to determine the matchups, and this is what the wheel gave us. The top 8 will be playing in the upper bracket here, and here's what those matchups would look like. The format here is very simple. The winners will move on to week 2 to play each other, while the losers will drop down to the lower bracket to face off against the other teams who lost their first games. Now, the important thing to note about these top 8 teams is that none of these teams are facing elimination. These games are just for seeding purposes. That's one of the benefits of making it to the top 8. Now, the teams from this group who make it out of the play-in stage will end up taking that first seed in the next stage of the tournament. This will be a lot more clear when we take a look at the next stage of the tournament. But before we do that, let's talk about the lower bracket. The lower bracket is going to be a very similar concept to the previous one, where teams from Group A will be matched up with teams from Group B. The difference here is that all 16 of these teams are facing elimination in this stage of the tournament. This is a double elimination format for the 16 teams. So if you lose 2 games in this stage, you will be eliminated in the play-in stage of the tournament. Of course, the teams who win their matchups in week 1 in this bracket will move on to play each other during week 2, while the teams who lose will be playing an elimination game. You'll see here Ronin, Cerberus, LWJG, BA, ICF, CA, Circle, and Valkyria are all facing elimination games at this stage. As you can see, there will be a 3rd round of games for that elimination bracket to determine the final 4 teams that move on. In this case, you'll see that the winners of the upper bracket games playing on the weekend of October 22nd will move on to the group stage and take 3rd seed, while the winners of the elimination bracket playing on October 29th will move on to the group stage and take the 4th seed. Now, this means that out of the 16 teams playing in the play-in, 8 teams will be eliminated in this stage of the tournament. And those 3 weeks of games will take us to the group stage of the tournament, in which case the seeding from the play-ins are taken into consideration for the matchups. Teams will be randomly drawn into 2 groups, Group A and Group B. Now, for both groups, the seeding matchups are the same. 1st seed will take on 4th seed, while 2nd seed will take on 3rd seed. And of course, the wheel will be determining these matchups. In our example bracket here, you can see what these matchups might look like for both Group A and also Group B. Now let's take a look back at Group A for a moment, because the format here is very similar to the play-in stage. Teams who win their matchups in week 1 will play each other in the following week, the weekend of November the 12th, while teams who lose their week 1 games will drop down into, you guessed it, an elimination bracket. So for both Group A and Group B, it is going to be a double elimination format. Now, teams in the upper bracket here who lose their matchups on the weekend of November the 12th will drop down to the elimination bracket the following week, the weekend of November 19th. And the bracket is fairly straightforward to anything you may have seen in a previous HLL tournament. Now, from each bracket, out of 8 teams that are put in there, only 3 of them are moving on to the playoffs. You'll see here that the winners of game A11 and B11 will move on to the playoffs and take the semifinal position. Now, the opponents they played in that matchup, in this case Infiltration and 82nd AD, still get to the playoffs, but they do have to play that first round on the weekend of December 3rd. Their opponents will be the teams who won their games in the elimination bracket of the group stage. In this case, that would be Fins Let Loose and The Line. And so now we have an idea of what the playoffs might look like. The format from there will be pretty straightforward, as the winners of the Week 1 playoff games will move on to the semifinals to play Syndicate and Phoenix, and the winners of the semis will face off in one grand final game. And that's about it. We have 24 teams playing 10 weeks of games over 3 stages of the tournament, all fighting for one spot. We're very excited for this edition of Seasonal. We're happy to have you join us, and we're looking forward to another great tournament. Thanks, everybody.